Welcome everyone to the final chapter of Frindle. Hopefully you've been following along with the whole story so you can take an AR test after this. If you haven't and you've forgotten a few things, you're welcome to go back and rewatch some videos so you're ready to get 100%. So I don't know about you, but I'm excited to see what happens to be the end of this story and maybe to find out what is in that letter from Mrs. Granger.
When asked when the battle would finally be over and Nick would get his letter, I got a variety of responses, all the way from when Frindle's no longer used, to when things go back to normal, except people still use the word Frindle, to when Mrs. Granger says it's over, to when Frindle is a real word. But what I really wanted people to think about a little bit is what's really important to Mrs. Granger. What makes her think that she has either completely won or completely lost? What's one of the most important things in Mrs. Granger's classroom? See if that helps you make a little prediction right now for what's going to happen later on in this chapter.
Chapter 15, and the winner is? 10 years later, Nick Allen was a junior in college, and during November of his junior year, two important things happened. First, Nick turned 21 years old, and the Frindle Trust Fund set up by his father became legally Nick's. That means he now had access to all the money that Bud Lawrence had been putting in over the years. Nick was rich. Nick was very rich. Nick was so rich he couldn't even begin to imagine how rich he really was. Nick wanted to give his parents some of the money, which they said they did not need and they would not accept. But Nick reminded them that they had always wanted to travel and that they should just think of this as a big birthday present or something. So they accepted. And Nick also wanted to give some of the money to his big brother, James, who said he did not need it and would not accept it. But Nick reminded James that his 2-year-old daughter would grow up and go to college someday. And besides, hadn't James once given Nick his whole baseball card collection? So, James accepted the gift. After that, Nick went out and bought himself a fast new computer and about 10 new games and a mountain bike. Then he tried to forget about the money, which was a hard thing to do. He managed pretty well to keep working on his college degree as hard as ever. The second important thing that fall was the arrival of a package at the door of Nick's apartment one day. A large, heavy package, and it was from Mrs. Granger. There were 3 things in the package. 1, a brand new edition of a Webster College dictionary. 2, a short handwritten note taped to the cover of the dictionary. 3, a flat white envelope. Turning the white envelope over, Nick saw the name. His name. He had written it there one September afternoon in Mrs. Granger's room after school, 10 years ago. Nick set the envelope down and gently peeled off the note from the front of the dictionary. Dear Nicholas, please turn to page 541 of this book. Nick grabbed the dictionary and leaped to the page 541, his heart pounding, and there, between frimmel and fringe, he read, Frindle. Noun. A device used to write or make marks with ink. Arbitrary coinage, originated by Nicholas Allen, American, 1987. C. Pen. Nick went back to the note from Mrs. Granger. This is a brand new dictionary, the one that I recommend my students use for their homework. And now, when I teach them how new words are added to the dictionary, I tell each and every one of them to look up the word Frindle. And of course, I have sent along the letter I promised I would give you when this little battle was over. And now, it's over. Your teacher, Mrs. Lorelei Granger. Nick's head was spinning. With shaking hands, he opened the fat white envelope and pulled out the 10-year-old letter and began to read. Ah, so the way she counted it was over. And I guess she knew a long time ago it was over when his word was a real word, a word in her beloved dictionary. Dear Nicholas, if you are reading this letter, it means that the word Frindle has been added to the dictionary. Congratulations. A person can watch the sunrise, but he cannot slow it down or stop it or make it go backwards. And that is what I was trying to do with your word. At first, I was angry. I admit that. I was not happy to see the word pen pushed aside as if it did not matter. But I guess that if the Latin word for feather had been frindellus instead of pina, then you would probably have invented the word pen instead. Like the sunrise, some things just have to happen. And all you can really do is watch. The word Frindle has existed for less than 3 weeks. Because remember, this was her prediction. She didn't know it was going to be in a dictionary yet. This was 10 years ago. The word Frindle has existed for less than 3 weeks. I now see that this is the kind of chance that a teacher hopes for and dreams about. A chance to see a bright young student take an idea they have learned in a boring old classroom and put it to the real test in their own world. I confess that I am very excited to see how all this turns out. I am mostly here to watch it happen. But somehow, I think I have a small part to play in this drama. And I have been chosen to be the villain. Every good story needs a bad guy, don't you think? So someday, I will be asking you to forgive me, and I hope you will. Nick, I know you like to think. Please think about this. When I started teaching, no one had landed on the moon. There were no space shuttles, no CNN, no weather satellites. There were no video cassette recorders, no CDs, no computers. The world has changed in a million ways. That is why I have always tried to teach children something that would be useful no matter what. So many things have gone out of date, but after all these years, words are still important. Words are still needed by everyone. Words are used to think with, to write with, to dream with, to hope and pray with. And that is why I love the dictionary. It endures. It works. And, as you know, it also changes and grows. Again, congratulations. And I enclose a little present for you. Yours truly, Mrs. Granger. Nick remembered Mrs. Granger's eyes, and now understood what some of those special looks had meant. The old fox! She had been rooting for Frindle the whole time. By fighting against it, she was actually helping it along. Yeah, because could you imagine if she hadn't been putting all those kids in detention and making a big deal out of it, he might have just gone away. He might have not ended up in the newspaper or on national TV and spreading his word around. By being against the word, she was really kind of helping the word. There was a flat, oblong case in the white envelope, the kind of case you get when you buy a watch. Nick pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside was something Nick had not seen for 10 years. It was Mrs. Granger's favorite pen, her old maroon fountain pen with the blue cap, and under the clip was a little folded piece of paper. It was another note, a very short note, just one word. Frindle. She had labeled her own pen Frindle 10 years ago, planning to send it to Nick when his word got in the dictionary. So she sent him two things, the dictionary and her old pen. About a month later, something happened over in the old part of Westfield, over where the trees are huge and the houses are small. On Christmas morning, Mrs. Granger's doorbell rang. Mrs. Granger opened the door, but no one was there. She had a package left inside her storm door. A box wrapped in green paper with a red bow and a white envelope taped to one end. She smiled as she stooped down to pick it up. As she picked up the package, she noticed a red, white, and blue express mail envelope sticking halfway out her mailbox next to the doorway. It must have been delivered late on Christmas Eve. She opened the storm door and plucked the envelope from the mailbox, and then shut both the doors and went inside with a shiver. Mrs. Granger went across the living room and sat on the couch. The express envelope was from the Westfield School District office. It looked important, so Mrs. Granger opened it right away. It was a letter from the superintendent of schools. A letter of congratulations. A permanent trust fund for college scholarships had been established with a donation of $1 million from one of your former students. I wonder which one. It would be called the Lorelei Granger Students Fund. Mrs. Granger was sure it was a mistake, or maybe a prank. $1 million? Nonsense! She had the urge to pick up the telephone and give the superintendent a call and straighten this out right away. But this was Christmas morning, and even though the superintendent was one of her former pupils is another word for students, Mrs. Granger decided to wait a day. Couldn't hurt. Besides, the other package was sitting on her couch, waiting impatiently with its red bow. She opened the envelope first. It was a little Christmas card with sloppy note, obviously the work of a 5th grade boy. Dear Mrs. Granger, you're one of my favorite teachers. Here is something I want you to have. Sincerely, a student of yours. Mrs. Granger glared at the spelling mistakes, but then chuckled and shook her head. Kids are always the same, year after year. Here she was in her 45th year of teaching, all set to retire in June. She could hardly remember a Christmas day when she didn't have a present from one of her students. Mrs. Granger pulled off the red ribbon and tore open the paper and lifted the lid. She expected to find something made of yarn and popsicle sticks, or maybe a curly macaroni and glue. But inside, she found an oblong case covered with blue velvet, and she opened the case. Inside was a beautiful gold fountain pen. She picked it up, and it was cool and heavy in her hands. Words were engraved along the pen's shiny barrel, and Mrs. Granger had to slide it down to the end of the couch so she could turn on her reading lamp. Then she could read the 3 thin lines of type. So this is Mrs. Granger with... Oh, no, I think this is Nick. Sorry. This is Nick from a while ago. This is Nick with his pen, not Mrs. Granger with her pen. This is Nick with his pen and his dictionary that Mrs. Granger gave him. Anyway, on Mrs. Granger's pen, though, the 3 thin lines of type said, "This object belongs to Lorelei Granger, and she may call it any name she chooses. With love, from Nicholas Allen." So, that is the end of the story. I hope you've enjoyed Frindle, had some laughs, learned a little bit of something about words and how they changed. And if you haven't already, you shouldn't have already, but you should right after this. Go ahead and take the AR test and take the final quiz into the description box below. If you're blocked out of the AR test, just send me a message and I can unblock it for you. Alright.